Welcome to this show of Diabetic 365, and today we have here Constance Brown. She's the author of the book African American Guide to Living Well with Diabetes. She's also a diabetic educator, and here today she is to share all the tips and tricks the diabetic people needs to learn, and she's going to share some of the things that she has written in her book. So welcome. Thanks to being on the show, Constance.
Thank you. You're quite welcome.
So what's your book about, Living with Diabetes, all about?
Well, actually, it's just that. It's to show the individual that has diabetes how they can live well. Oftentimes, people think if they have diabetes, it's the end of the world, or food is going to be taken away from them. They won't be able to enjoy the flavors that they've grown accustomed to. And so the book helps to kind of let people know that you can live well with diabetes. You don't have to give up the food that you love. You can still include all of those tastes and flavors in your daily meal planning.
Okay, so your title is African American Guide to Living Well with Diabetes. So how do you think the role has to play a factor in diabetes?
Yeah, actually, in terms of African Americans, when we talk about diabetes, it's the same regardless of ethnicity. The actual diagnosis and what constitutes diabetes is the same. But then there's always the cultural context. So whether we're talking about an African American, a European American, someone from Ethiopia, we have to take that into consideration because their lifestyle is going to be different. And one of the things that we know, we've got a large body of evidence to show us that, is that if we can work with individuals within their cultural context and beliefs, we're able to get much better results. And so the African American Guide is really speaking to African Americans, as I say, in a voice that they can hear and understand and that they're going to be receptive to.
So you think that African Americans are in large number affecting this with diabetes?
Oh yes, they're also, particularly in the United States, they're one of the highest groups that are affected with diabetes. As you said, you have African Americans, Asian Americans, the American Indians also are affected at disproportionate rates with diabetes. And a lot of it, at this point in time, what we're seeing really has to do with the epidemic of obesity as well. And as we see obesity increase, we're also seeing diabetes increase. So they're kind of going along the same trail together, if you will.
So do you think that there is a cultural stigma, the way they live, the way they eat, the way they, their lifestyle is affecting them?
Well, that certainly has a lot to do with it. I won't necessarily say a stigma, but certainly the lifestyle is part of the problem. One of the things when we look at African Americans is the view in terms of body image and weight. So oftentimes when I'm working with a client and I'm trying to get them to understand the benefit of weight loss, I can't approach the African American from the point of view of, well, you're going to look better in your clothes, because their acceptance of weight is at a higher degree, if you will. So I really have to approach them from the perspective of how it's going to affect the body and to prevent illness and to prevent the complications that are associated with diabetes. And also another buy-in is just the fact that they may actually require less medication if they're able to get their weight under control.
Okay, another question is here. What's wrong with the American diet today?
I think the biggest problem with the American diet today is portion control. Because as I tell my clients, there's really nothing that a person with diabetes absolutely has to stay away from. The biggest problem is the portion. Everything is supersized. Everything is extra large. We don't know, what a decent serving size is. And when you put a serving size in front of someone, they're frowning. It's not enough. I need more food. So that is our biggest problem, the portions.
So do you think that we are all eating more in terms of calories than we did 20 or 30 years back?
Without a doubt, without a doubt. One of the things that that the dietary guidelines were released in January, and just earlier this month we had the release of My Plate, which is kind of like the icon that will show individuals how to proportion their food on the plate. And if you look at that plate and think about what a person would typically eat, you can see that that's steering us in the right direction in terms of eating smaller portions. But the portion control is the biggest problem. And the larger the portion, the more calories. The larger the portion, the more carbohydrate. The larger the portion, the more sodium, the more cholesterol, the more everything. So that's why, my firm belief is portion control is one of our biggest problems.
So portion control is the key.
Yes, yes.
So the next question is, how do you change your mind and behavior in dealing with this diabetes? That's in your chapter 4. Can you please explain?
I do talk about changing your mind in order to change your behavior, because you certainly have to be in the right frame of mind to make progress along dealing with diabetes. It is a daily disease. It's something that you have to be mindful of every single day. And oftentimes people are in a state of denial. And that denial, unfortunately, can last a very long time. So I try to get people to really think about where they are in terms of their readiness to make a change, whether or not they are in fact in denial, to examine that and think about it. And then once an individual gets past denial, then we're going to be able to really make progress in terms of management and living well with diabetes on a daily basis.
Okay, so speaking to the last question, like food pyramid, recently they have changed from the food pyramid to My Plate. So the first question is, why do you think that they changed? Is there any problem with the food pyramid that they came up last few years back? And what is the change they made in the My Plate, and how is this going to affect, or how is it going to make better?
Well, the original food guide pyramid didn't really, it was confusing to a lot of people. It did have the rainbow of colors that illustrated, the diet should be one with variety of colors in terms of fruits and vegetables and all. And it had, a narrow band indicating a smaller amount, but it still left most consumers very confused. They really didn't get it. And the pyramid itself actually required a health professional to work along with the individual in order for them to gain some understanding of how to use that. The new icon, as they call it, My Plate, the goal is that this is something that anyone can look at and get a clear sense of what their plate should look like, how they should be portioning their food. So I think the new icon is absolutely going to be received much better, more readily than the old pyramid. And based on a lot of feedback that I've gotten already, it has done its job in terms of being accepted more readily. Consumers find it to be something that is very simple, straightforward, and they get it. Of course, even with that, for the person with diabetes, they still have to be mindful of how much carbohydrate is on that plate, because we know that it's the carbohydrate that has a major impact on their blood sugar level. And of course, the more carbohydrate a person with diabetes is consuming at one time, the higher their blood sugar is going to go. So even with My Plate, we've got to be careful.
So even with My Plate, you have to be careful with your portion.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. I had someone tell me, I think they heard it on the radio, they were talking about My Plate, and they were saying, well, how high you can fill each one of those sections. So it may not be any wider, but it can certainly be piled up high. So that's another problem.
Exactly.
People will always find a way to get by with more food.
Exactly. So portion is the key.
Yes, definitely.
My next question to you is, what are all this low sugar, low carb stuff that the food companies are trying to market to you?
Well, that can be a bit of a challenge to individuals as well. When they see on the front of the package, it may say low sugar, or it may say low carb, or it may say no sugar added. The important thing is really to flip the package over and read the list of ingredients and read the nutrition facts label. And we know in terms of diabetes, it's total carbohydrate that is most important. Things that are high in sugar that are bad for you, we already know. Most people know that. Cookies, cakes, candy, jellies, jams, things like that. So you really want to flip the package over, read the nutrition facts in the back, and not really pay attention to, as I call it, the marketing ploy that's on the front of that package. Because that's to get you, that's to kind of, grab your attention and get you to pick up that particular package. Now, when something says no sugar added, it means just that. They haven't added any additional sugar, but there may be sugar naturally occurring that's in that particular product. So again, that's why it's so important to read the list, the full list of ingredients, and that will let you know whether or not there's any added sugar in that product.
So in your book, you talked about reading the food labels. What is the best method, and what do you need to understand from the food label?
Well, the very first thing is to understand, and actually, oh no, I don't have my label. I have a big label that I was looking for. I don't have that here with me. But one of the very first things that I get my patients to look at is what is considered a serving size on the label, what they consider a serving size, and then also how many servings are in that particular package. Oftentimes, we use Snapple as an example. People think of Snapple as being just one serving. And if you actually look at that nutrition facts panel, you're going to see it's 2.5 servings. So that's number one, what the manufacturer considers a serving, and then how many servings are in that particular package. And then the next thing, I have them scan down and look at total carbohydrate. And I know I've said that over and over again, but that is the key. That's the starting point for that person with diabetes. How many grams of carbohydrate are found in that particular product? And then I start that way the first week maybe, and then when someone comes back, we'll look at some of the other things on the food label. We'll begin to look at the fat, and we'll look at the sodium and the cholesterol. But the first thing, first and foremost, is understanding how to determine how much carbohydrate is found in that particular product that they may be eating.
So how much portion do you think is the optimal? How much is better? Either it's a carbohydrate or is it sugar, anything?
It's carbohydrate. So often people think in terms of sugar, and the doctor may tell an individual, well, just stay away from sugar, don't add any sugar. You have to look at total carbohydrate. You may have a label and read, and it may look very low in sugar, maybe only 3 grams of sugar, but it could have more than 20 grams of total carbohydrate. So that means that there's at least 17 grams that you're not counting that are going to impact your overall blood glucose control. So it's not the sugar that's the important thing, it's total carbohydrate. And just to be mindful, things that we need to really keep very low that are high in sugar, most often we already know those foods. So total carbohydrate is the key. And read the list of ingredients at the bottom of the nutrition facts panel.
If that's the case, then here is an interesting question for you. So what about the Atkins diet? Atkins diet is all about low carb, but there is high in fat. So why didn't it work?
Well, one of the things with Atkins, and they've done some research, they've done some studies, people certainly will lose weight with that, but it's just not a healthy diet. It's not what we consider a healthy weight loss. And particularly in individuals with diabetes where there's already that risk for kidney disease and high blood pressure and all those other complications that go along with diabetes. So we certainly would not want someone with diabetes going on an Atkins